The first sign that the 3 days would be a special kind of hell was the silent treatment that began the moment my mom's sedan pulled up to our Lincoln Park brownstone. Not for my mother, Eleanor, pale, but smiling bravely as she wrestled her small weekender bag from the back seat. No, the silence was a thick, frosty wall emanating from my husband, Jake, who stood beside me on the front steps, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his chinos. "There she is," I called out, my voice too bright, skipping down the steps to take the bag and hug her. She felt fragile. "How was the drive?" "Oh, you know, the usual I-90 traffic," she said, her eyes flickering over my shoulder to Jake. "Jake, thank you for having me on such short notice. I'm so sorry to be a bother." Jake descended one step, offering a smile that didn't reach his slate blue eyes. "Eleanor, no bother. We just appreciate a heads up." Usually, he leaned in for the briefest, stiffest shoulder pat she'd ever received. The heads up comment hung in the chilly November air. I'd told him the moment I got off the phone with her yesterday. "Mom's really sick. Jake, that stomach bug is knocking her out." "She shouldn't be alone." His response had been a long sigh and, "Can't she just ride it out? It's a bug. Everyone gets them. Let's get you inside," I said, looping my arm through hers, steering us past Jake's immobile form. "I made up the guest room, and there's tea, or broth if you think you can manage it." The first 24 hours were a masterclass in passive aggression. Jake's preferred method of communication became exaggerated sighs and the dramatic rolling of his eyes, usually when my back was turned to him, but perfectly positioned for my mother to see. He'd retreat to his study, the second bedroom with his gaming PC, and close the door with a firm, definitive click that echoed through the apartment. Dinner that first night was the main event. I'd made a bland chicken and rice soup, hoping it would sit well with my mom. The three of us sat at our sleek, modern dining table that a Jake pick, all cold edges and glass. Impossible to keep clean. "This is very kind, Sadie," Mom said, taking a careful spoonful. "Much better than anything I could have scraped together." "It's no trouble," I said. Jake slurped his soup, the sound obscenely loud in the quiet room. He set his spoon down with a clatter. "So, Eleanor, what's the plan?" "The plan?" she asked, blinking. "For your visit, duration, that sort of thing." He didn't look at her, instead using his thumb to wipe an invisible smudge from the table's edge. A hot prickle crawled up my neck. "Jake, we talked about this. A few days, until she's back on her feet." "Right, a few days." Vague. He finally looked at her, that non-smile back on his face. "I'm a planner, Eleanor. I like routines. Sadie and I, we have our rhythm, our system. Unexpected house guests, even beloved ones, can really disrupt the ecosystem. You know." My mother's spoon hovered halfway to her mouth. The color that had begun to return to her cheeks drained away. I understand. I don't want to be a disruption. Truly, I can leave tomorrow. I'm already feeling a bit better. Don't be silly, Mom." I cut in, my eyes locking on Jake. "You're not a disruption. You're family. This is your home too when you need it." The last part was a direct challenge, aimed at him. He held my gaze for a beat, then shrugged, picking up his spoon again. "I'm just saying, for the future, a little more notice would be appreciated, so we can prepare, mentally." The word prepare hung there, painting a picture of my mother as a natural disaster to be boarded against. She spent the rest of the meal in near silence, eating as little as she could politely get away with before claiming exhaustion and retreating to the guest room. The moment the door clicked shut, I whirled on Jake, who was already carrying his bowl to the sink. "What the hell was that?" "What was what?" he asked, not turning around, turning on the faucet. "A little more notice? Disrupt the ecosystem? Are you kidding me? She's sick. Jake, she drove 2 hours because she was too weak to argue with me about coming to get her. And you're giving her a lecture on etiquette?" He shut off the water and turned, leaning against the counter, arms crossed. I'm not giving a lecture. I'm stating a fact. This is my house. Sadie, our house. I have a right to feel comfortable in it. I don't feel comfortable with spontaneous house guests. She's not a house guest. She's my mother. Semantics. She is a guest. In our house. For an unspecified period. It throws everything off. My workout schedule. My ability to just decompress after work in my own space. Your ability to decompress? My voice was rising. A thin, sharp edge to it I hardly recognized. She's been in the guest room or the bathroom for most of the day. What space is she invading? The living room you haven't set foot in since you got home? It's the principal, he said, his voice dropping into that calm, condescending tone that always made me feel hysterical. You're missing the point because you're emotional. I'm talking about respect for our shared space, for our life as a couple. You just unilaterally decided to change the dynamics of our home for the foreseeable future. Did you consider me? My feelings? The sheer, breathtaking hypocrisy of it stole my breath for a second. Consider you? She has a fever. Jake, she was throwing up 12 hours ago. Where was the consideration for her? For me? Worrying about her alone in that big house? She's a grown woman. She could have called an ambulance if it was that dire. He pushed off the counter and walked past me toward the hall. I'm going to the study. I need some space. This isn't a productive conversation. Jake, he paused, not looking back. We'll talk when you're calmer and when we have our privacy back. The door to the study clicked shut. Again, I stood alone in the gleaming, silent kitchen. The ghost of his words, my house, my space, my comfort, echoing in the air, colder and more final than the click of any lock. The next 2 days followed the same pattern, a tense, silent breakfast where Jake would scroll through his phone, ignoring my mother's polite good morning. He'd leave for work with a perfunctory bye, aimed at the space between us. My mother would spend the day apologizing for everything, for needing more ginger ale, for the blanket she'd used on the couch, for being in the way. I'd try to soothe her. Mom, stop. You're fine. This is your daughter's home. She'd give me a look full of a sadness I couldn't immediately place. It's his home too. Sweetheart, I see that I've overstepped. You haven't. I'd insist. But the assurance rang hollow. The evidence was in the oppressive atmosphere, in the way Jake's displeasure was a third, unwanted presence in every room. The final straw came on what was supposed to be her last night. She was feeling markedly better, her appetite returning. I'd made a simple pasta, a small celebration. As we sat down, Jake looked at the food, then at my mother's hopeful face. Pasta, carb heavy, he remarked, serving himself a meager portion. Eleanor, you must be feeling better if you're tackling this. I am. Thank you, she said softly. Good. So, you'll be heading back to Glen Coe tomorrow morning. Then, beat the traffic. It wasn't a question. It was a decree, delivered with that bland, corporate finality he used to end meetings. My mother's face fell. She set her fork down. Oh, well, yes. I suppose I couldn't take it anymore. The 3 days of microaggressions, the eye rolls she thought I didn't see, the cold shoulders, the blatant disrespect cloaked in the language of boundaries and comfort. It coalesced into a white-hot point of fury in my chest. She'll leave when she's ready and not a moment sooner, I said, my voice dangerously calm. And she's welcome to stay a week if she needs to. This is my home as much as yours, Jake, and in my home, we take care of family when they're sick. It's a pretty simple concept. The table went utterly silent. Jake stared at me, his jaw tight, a flush creeping up his neck. My mother looked down at her plate, her hands folded in her lap. After a long, loaded moment, Jake stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the hardwood. Fine. You two enjoy your pasta. I've lost my appetite. He took his plate, still nearly full, to the kitchen. We heard the scrape of the trash can lid, the thud of his dish in the sink, and then the familiar, damning click of his study door. My mother didn't cry. She was tougher than that. But when she looked at me, her eyes were glassy with a hurt that had nothing to do with a stomach virus. Sadie, honey, I think I'm going to head home tonight. I'm feeling much better. Really. I'd just rather be in my own bed. Mom, no, don't let him do this. Don't let him chase you out. He's not chasing me out, she said, but the words were a gentle lie to spare me. I'm choosing to go. This was a mistake. I'm so sorry I put you in this position. You didn't put me in any position. Headed, the anger was threatening to spill over, morph into helpless, furious tears. I was angry at him, but in that moment, I was also, shamefully, a sliver angry at her for leaving, for making me face the aftermath of this alone. She was packed in 20 minutes. I helped her carry her bag to the car, the Chicago wind biting through my sweater. She hugged me tightly at the driver's side door. You call me if you need anything. Okay. And Sadie. She pulled back, cupping my face. Her hands were warm now, the fever gone. You look at this. Really look at it. This isn't about pasta or a few nights on a guest bed. You understand me? I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Unable to speak. I understood. The message had been received. Loud and clear. In Jake's ecosystem, my family was an invasive species. His comfort was the supreme law, and I had just committed the treason of challenging it. I watched her taillights disappear down the street, a profound sense of loneliness and betrayal settling in my bones. When I walked back into the silent, spotless apartment, the click of the front door locking behind me sounded like a verdict. The apartment didn't just feel empty after my mom's car disappeared down the street. It felt charged, like the air after a lightning strike, thin, brittle, and waiting for the next clap of thunder. I stood in the foyer, the taste of my own anger and shame metallic on my tongue. The click of the lock behind me was the period on a sentence I hadn't meant to write. My husband is an asshole. My mother knows it. I'm only just admitting it. I could hear the faint, tinny sounds of a first-person shooter game bleeding from under the study door. The digital gunfire felt like a deliberate provocation. He wasn't sulking, he was celebrating. He'd won. The disruption to his precious ecosystem had been evicted. I walked to the kitchen, my movements slow and deliberate. Our wedding photo, a staged, glossy thing from a Napa Valley vineyard, sat on the breakfast bar. His arm was around me, his smile wide and perfect. Mine looked genuine then. Now, I wondered what micro-expression I'd missed that day, what subtle hint of future control had been hidden in the crinkle of his eyes. I turned the frame face down. The soft thud was more satisfying than it should have been. The study door opened. Jake emerged, not with contrition, but with the weary air of a man emerging from a hard day's labor. He went to the fridge, pulled out a craft beer, popped the cap, and took a long swig, leaning against the counter as if he owned the very molecules of air around him, which, in his mind, he probably did. She get off okay? He asked, his tone suggesting he was asking about a problematic Uber driver. What do you think, Jake? I didn't turn around. I stared at the sink, at the 2 abandoned plates from dinner. His, with its perfectly scraped off, wasted pasta. My mother's, with its barely touched portion. I think she's home, where she's comfortable, and we can get back to normal, he said, as if stating an obvious, benign fact. Look, Sadie, we need to talk about what just happened. That did it. I turned. Wayne to talk? You need to talk. I need an explanation. No, scratch that. I need an apology. A real one. For the last 3 days. He sighed, the long-suffering sigh of a teacher dealing with a particularly dense child. An apology for what? For being honest about my feelings? For valuing our peace? Your mother was sick. You moved her in. Fine. Mission accomplished. She's better. She left. The system worked. The system? I echoed, disbelief making my voice thin. She's a person. Jake, my mother, not a glitch in your system. You treated her like an intruder. You rolled your eyes at her. You made snide comments about her duration. You threw away a plate of food to make a point. What is wrong with you? He set his beer down with a sharp clack. What's wrong with me? I'll tell you what's wrong. Your lack of boundaries is what's wrong. We are a married couple. This is our unit. Our primary family. Not you and Eleanor. Us. When you unilaterally decide to move someone in anyone. Even your mother, that you disrespect that unit. You disrespect me. The mental gymnastics were astounding. Disrespect you? By caring for a sick parent? By not consulting? By not taking my comfort into account? This is my home too. I have a right to come home and not have to perform for an audience. Perform? She was in bed for 2 days. What performance did she demand? A matinee of Jake isn't a condescending jerk? His face hardened. Watch your tone. You're getting emotional and hyperbolic. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're so enmeshed with her. You can't see how unhealthy this is. A normal, healthy adult handles a stomach bug with Gatorade and Netflix, not by imposing on their daughter's marriage. Each word was a small, precise hammer, designed to reshape my reality. Enmeshed, unhealthy, imposing. He was pathologizing a basic human decency, framing my love for my mother as a character flaw, a threat to our union. Don't you dare psychoanalyze me or my relationship with my mother, I said, my hands trembling. I clenched them into fists. This isn't about her. This is about you. You were rude. You were cruel. You made her feel unwelcome in a place that should be a refuge. You hurt me. Do you even get that? Or is your comfort the only feeling that registers on your radar? He took a step closer, not in intimacy, but in confrontation. His voice dropped, low and cold. Let me be very clear, Sadie. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. I will not be made to feel like the villain for wanting peace and order in my own life. You have a choice here. You can choose to be a wife, my wife, and respect the life we're building together. Or you can choose to be a daughter first, and let your mother's needs, and your own childish guilt about them, dictate the terms of our marriage. But you can't have both. Not if it looks like this. The ultimatum hung in the air, ugly and final. My wife or a daughter. My way or your mother. IT was a box he was trying to force me into. A false dichotomy where he held all the power to define the terms. So that's it? I whispered, the fight seeping out of me, replaced by a cold, clarifying dread. I have to choose? I'm not asking you to choose, he said, his tone softening into something patronizing, as if he were explaining a difficult concept. I'm asking you to prioritize us, this. He gestured between us. If we're going to have a family of our own someday, we need to have strong boundaries. Starting now. What happened this weekend can't happen again. No more surprise guests. No more disruptions. We agree on a plan. Together. Before anyone sets foot in this house. Is that really so unreasonable? It sounded reasonable. That was the genius of it. Wrapped in the language of partnership, boundaries, and future planning. His utter selfishness sounded like mature marital advice. The part of me that had loved him, that still desperately wanted this to be a misunderstanding, clung to that thread of reasonableness. Maybe I had been impulsive. Maybe I should have managed the situation better. But the newer, colder part of me, the part that had seen the look in my mother's eyes as she fled, saw the trap. Agreeing meant endorsing his treatment of her. It meant accepting that his comfort was the supreme good, and anyone or anything that disturbed it, including my sick parent, that was an enemy to our marriage. It meant giving him veto power over my family. I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, at this man I'd promised my life to, and saw a stranger, a very convincing, handsome stranger who believed his own narrative completely. My silence seemed to satisfy him. He mistook it for a capitulation. He reached out and patted my shoulder, the way you'd pat a dog that had stopped barking. Good. I'm glad we're on the same page. It's been a stressful few days. Let's just reset. Okay, I'm going to finish my game. And just like that, he dismissed me, the conflict, my feelings, my mother's hurt, all swept into the stressful few days bin, to be taken out with the trash. He picked up his beer and walked back to his study. The door clicked shut. The digital gunfire started up again. I was alone, not just alone in the room, but alone in my marriage. The chilling realization settled deep in my gut. He believed every word he'd just said. In his world, he was the rational, boundary-setting hero, and I was the emotional, enmeshed wife who needed correction. I needed to hear a voice that wasn't his, that wasn't echoing his warped logic inside my own head. I grabbed my phone and fled to our bedroom, locking the door at a small, futile act of rebellion. I scrolled to Chloe's contact, my best friend since Northwestern, now a fiercely pragmatic marketing director who had never, not even at our wedding, fully approved of Jake. He's too polished. Sad, she'd said once, like a movie villain before the third act reveal. I'd laughed it off. Now, the memory felt like a punch. She answered on the second ring. Hey, you, how's your mom? Her voice was warm, immediate concern, and I broke. The whole story tumbled out in a choked, disjointed rush. The eye rolls, the ecosystem comment, the thrown away pasta, the silent treatment, the way he'd stared at her suitcase as if it were a biohazard container. And then, the confrontation, his my home speech, the ultimatum, the pat on the shoulder. Chloe listened without interrupting. When I finally ran out of words, hiccuping on silent sobs, she let out a long, low whistle. Jesus, Sadie. Okay, breathe. Just breathe for a second. I took a shuddering breath. First, she said, her voice shifting into what I called her battle plan tone. Your mom is okay. She's home. You did the right thing. Never doubt that. Second, and listen to me carefully. Jake is full of shit. A wet laugh escaped me. He sounded so sure of himself. Of course he did. Abusers, emotional ones. Financial ones. All kinds, always sound sure. They have to. Their whole game depends on you doubting your own reality. He's reframing basic human compassion as a personal attack on him. That's manipulation 101. Honey, enmeshed? Please, he's isolating you. It starts with the parents. Then it'll be me. Then it'll be your coworker you have lunch with too often. He's testing the perimeter fence, seeing how much disrespect you'll swallow to keep the peace. Hearing it laid out so bluntly, in Chloe's no-nonsense syllables, made the vague dread solidify into a cold, hard knot. You think that's what this is? I know that's what this is. Remember when you first started dating? He, jokingly, said my master's degree in feminist theory was why I was still single. When you got that promotion, he said it was cute you were taking your little job so seriously. He's been laying the groundwork for years. Sadie, chipping away, making you feel like your instincts, your relationships, your successes are somehow less important than his feelings, his routines, his ecosystem. She spat the word. This thing with your mom? It's not a one-off. It's an escalation. He thought she was an easy target, and he went for it. And when you pushed back, he doubled down and gave you an ultimatum. This is a test. He's seeing how far he can push you. I thought of the framed photo, face down on the counter. I thought of the click of the study door, over and over, a sound of dismissal. I thought of his calm, smug face as he told me to choose. I feel so stupid. I whispered. Don't you dare. Chloe said, fierce. You're not stupid. You're trusting. You loved him. He's exploiting that. The question is, what are you going to do now? I don't know. I admitted. The idea of doing anything, confronting him again, leaving. Even just having another conversation felt exhausting. The path of least resistance was to do what he likely expected, to fume quietly, then get over it, to accept his framework, to prioritize. Well, you don't have to decide tonight, Chloe said, her voice softening, but you need to start paying attention. Write it down. Every comment, every eye roll, every time he makes you feel small. Document the pattern. And for God's sake, stop trying to explain basic decency to him. He understands it. He just doesn't care. His goal isn't understanding, it's compliance. We talked for another hour. She made me laugh with imitations of Jake's serious business voice. She listened as I rehashed the same painful moments, offering not just sympathy, but analysis. She was my reality check, pulling me out of the funhouse mirror of my marriage and back onto solid ground. When I hung up, the apartment was silent. The game in the study had stopped. It was late. I changed for bed in the dark, sliding under the covers on my side, putting as much space as possible between me and Jake's side. He came in half an hour later. The bed dipped as he got in. He didn't touch me. He lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. I talked to Chloe. I said into the darkness. A small, defiant act of transparency. A long pause. Of course you did, he said, the disdain barely masked. Let me guess. I'm the villain in the fairy tale, and you and she are going to storm the castle. The accuracy of Chloe's prediction, then it'll be me, that sent a fresh chill through me. She's my friend. I needed a friend. You have a husband, he said, his voice flat. But you'd rather run to someone who's never supported our relationship, who's probably thrilled to have some fresh ammunition. That's healthy, Sadie, really mature. And there it was, not an engagement with my feelings, not a shred of self-reflection, just another pivot to attack my support system, to frame my seeking solace as an act of disloyalty to him. Chloe was right. This was the game, and I was only just learning the rules. I didn't answer. I closed my eyes and pretended to sleep. The distance between us in the king-sized bed felt like a canyon, and for the first time, lying in that dark, silent chasm, I didn't feel lonely for him. I felt lonely for the woman I used to be, the one who wouldn't have tolerated this for a second. I wondered where she'd gone, and if I had the courage to go find her again. The question echoed in the dark, unanswered, as Jake's breathing evened out into the untroubled sleep of the self-righteous. The Cold War that settled over our apartment in the days following my mother's departure was of a new, sophisticated variety. It wasn't the loud, door-slamming silence of our early fights. This was a calculated, atmospheric chill. Jake moved through the rooms as if I were a slightly inconvenient piece of furniture that acknowledged only when necessary. And then, with a detached, clinical air, he'd ask, "Is the water bill paid?" Or state, "The recycling goes out tomorrow." His voice devoid of any emotional texture. It was a punishment, I realized, a withdrawal of the basic warmth and recognition that constituted a relationship. He was showing me what a marriage looked like when it ran on the bare minimum of his choosing. I was being conditioned. I was too emotionally exhausted to fight it. Chloe's words echoed in my head. Document the pattern that I started a note on my phone. A private, damning ledger. November 12th. Silent treatment initiated. November 13th. Referred to our weekend as the Eleanor situation. November 14th. When I asked if he wanted to order Thai, he said, "Do whatever you want." You usually do. It felt pathetic and powerful at the same time. The crack in the ice or rather, the deliberate, self-serving thaw came on a Thursday evening. Jake's phone rang. The tinny marimba tone he'd assigned to his mother, Marjorie. His entire posture changed. The stiff, dismissive slump he'd maintained for days dissolved. He sat up straighter on the couch, his face animating with a practiced, boyish eagerness. "Hi, Mom," he answered, his voice bright. "Yeah, no, it's a perfect time." He listened, nodding. Of course. Of course. We'd love that. Let me check with Sadie on the dates. But I'm sure it's fine. She's right here. He held the phone away, not bothering to mute it. Sadie, Mom wants to come for Christmas. For the whole week. That works, right? It wasn't a question. It was a command wrapped in the flimsy paper of consultation. I could hear Marjorie's faint, tinny voice chirping from the speaker. The whiplash was dizzying. No more surprise guests. No more disruptions. We agree on a plan. Together, his own rules. Spoken with such conviction days ago. Evaporated in the glow of his mother's call. The hypocrisy was so bald, so breathtaking, that for a moment I just stared at him. He mistook my silence for compliance. See, Sadie's thrilled, he said into the phone, his eyes on me, hard and expectant. It's settled. We'll pick you up from O'Hare on the 23rd. Can't wait. Love you too. He hung up, the performative smile dropping from his face as he turned to me. Mom's coming. The 23rd to the 30th. I found my voice. It came out quieter than I intended, laced with a dangerous calm. You're sure my schedule is clear? That I don't have any prior commitments that might disrupt your ecosystem? He waved a dismissive hand. Don't be like that. This is different. It's Christmas. It's Mom. And my mother was sick. I said, the words sharp, but that was a disruption. This is what? A sacred tradition? His jaw tightened. It's planned, with notice, which is what I asked for. She's giving us a month's notice. That's reasonable. Your mother showed up with a suitcase and a bug. It's not the same thing, Sadie. And if you can't see the difference, that's your problem. He stood up, the conversation clearly over in his mind. I expect you to make her feel welcome. This is important to me. And with that, he left the room, leaving me sitting alone, the ghost of his double, Standard, hanging in the air, thick and suffocating, planned versus unplanned, his mother versus mine, important versus inconvenient. The rules were clear. They just weren't for him. The month that followed was a masterclass in cognitive dissonance. Jake resumed a semblance of normalcy to talking to me, even being mildly affectionate, but it all felt transactional. A down payment on the domestic labor he expected me to perform for his mother's visit. The directive started small, then escalated. Mom likes the guest bathroom to have those little boutique soaps, not the Costco pump. He mentioned one evening, scrolling through his tablet, the lavender kind. Can you order some? A few days later, her flight gets in at 4 p.m. I'll need you to pick her up. I've got a critical year-end sink I can't move. The need was pronounced, leaving no room for discussion about my own critical year-end deliverables. Then, the week before her arrival, he presented me with a list, not a shared note on our phones, a physical, printed list, left on the kitchen island like a royal decree. For Mom's visit, deep clean guest room bath, windows, baseboards, under bed, stock fridge, lactose-free milk, the organic brand, Ezekiel bread, free-range eggs, that expensive Scandinavian crisp bread she likes, floral arrangements, fresh ones in guest room and living room. Check with Sadie. Plan menus for the week. She doesn't eat red meat. Prefers fish. Remember the lemon dill salmon? Do that. Activities? Maybe tickets to the Christmas flower show at the conservatory or the Nutcracker. Ensure all guest towels/bedding are freshly laundered. Hypoallergenic detergent only. Check Netflix subscription is active that she's been watching that Danish drama. I stared at the list, the bolded header feeling like a brand. Check with Sadie. He'd written a note to himself about me. I was a line item, the project manager for the Marjorie experience. A list? I said, holding it up when he walked in that evening. I'm just trying to be organized, he said, hanging up his coat as if that explained everything. I want everything to be perfect for her. She doesn't get to visit often. You've never once made a list for my mother. I observed, my voice flat. He paused, then shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. Your mother's visits are different, less formal. This is how mom is. She appreciates the effort. It's how she shows love and how she feels loved. Is it really so hard to just do this? For me, the emotional blackmail was deft. For me, AS if my willingness to be his domestic concierge was a direct measure of my love. Refusing would make me the villain that the selfish wife who couldn't be bothered to make her mother-in-law feel welcome. The trap was exquisitely designed. So, I worked. I took a precious personal day to scrub the apartment until it gleamed. The chemical smell of cleaner, a bitter perfume. I drove to 3 different grocery stores to find the exact brand of lactose-free milk. I bought overpriced peonies and arranged them in vases. I prepped the lemon dill marinade. I did it all with a cold, simmering fury that felt like a new organ inside me. Each scrubbed baseboard, each located specialty item was a silent scream. I documented it all in my phone. December 18th. Took PTO to clean for Marjorie. December 20th. 3 stores for milk. List provided. The day of her arrival. I stood with Jake at the arrival's gate, a forced smile on my face. Marjorie emerged, crisp and put together in a cashmere coat, her silver hair in a perfect bob. She air-kissed Jake, then turned to me, her eyes scanning me up and down in a nanosecond assessment. Sadie, darling, you look tired, she said, offering a cheek so cold I could feel it through my makeup. The big city life wearing you down? Just busy with the holidays. Marjorie, I said, the lie smooth and automatic. She said, as if she didn't believe me. She handed me her carry-on while Jake took her larger suitcase. Led on. Dear, I'm desperate for a proper cup of tea. The coffee on that flight was swill. The welcome began the moment we stepped through our apartment door. Oh, Jakey, she cooed, touching his arm. The tree is lovely. You always had such an eye for decoration. The tree I had spent an evening assembling and decorating while he was at a work dinner. Jake accepted the praise with a modest smile. She toured the living room, her finger running along the mantel. She inspected the tip, then gave a small, approving nod. Very clean. I do appreciate a dust-free home. It was a compliment aimed at Jake for managing his help so well. Dinner that first night was the lemon dill salmon. I served it with roasted asparagus and her precious crisp bread. It's fine, dear, Marjorie said, taking a delicate bite of fish, a touch oversalted for my taste, but palatable. Jake, remember the salmon we had in Seattle? At that lovely little place by the pier? That was divine. Nothing compares to your cooking. Mom, Jake said, beaming at her. He turned to me. You should get Mom's recipe for the poached halibut. It's life-changing. I'd love it, I said, my face aching from the fake smile. It's all in the technique, Marjorie said, not offering to share it. Some people just have a feel for these things. She took a sip of water. So, Sadie, how is that little job of yours going? The marketing. It's going well, I said, my grip tightening on my fork. I'm actually leading a new campaign launch in Q1. How nice for you, she said, her tone indicating it was anything but nice. To have a little project. It's so important for wives to have hobbies, isn't it, Jake? Keeps them from getting underfoot. Jake chuckled, a dry, complicit sound. Sadie's very dedicated to her hobby. The word was a deliberate diminishment. A hobby was something trivial, like scrapbooking. My career, which paid for half of this apartment, half of this salmon, was a hobby. Of course, Marjorie continued, her eyes sharp on my face. I only ever wanted to be a mother. It's the most important job in the world. But I suppose times are different now. Jessica, white tennis partner's daughter, that she's just had her third. A beautiful boy. Gave up a big law career for it. That's commitment. She let the implication hang. You lack commitment. To what? Or to whom? Was painfully clear. Jake nodded along. as if she were dispensing sage wisdom. Family should come first, he said, his gaze flicking to me. It's about priorities. The conversation was a surgical strike, and I was on the operating table with no anesthesia. My career was a frivolous hobby. My lack of children, a failure of priority. My value, in this room, was measured in dust-free baseboards and correctly seasoned fish. And my husband was not just allowing it, he was a willing participant, nodding at every cut. Later, as I loaded the dishwasher, Jake came up behind me. He didn't help. He just stood there, watching. Mom seems happy, he observed. She mentioned the flower show at the Lincoln Park Conservatory. I got us tickets for tomorrow afternoon. You'll take her. I stopped, a plate in my hand. Tomorrow afternoon. Jake, I have a 2 p.m. stakeholder call. It's on the shared calendar. He sighed, the put-upon sound I'd come to dread. Can't you reschedule? Or take it on your phone from the car. It's just a call. This is important. I want her to feel special. You can manage your little job around this. Can't you? Little job, the echo of his mother's words. It was a tag team effort. He was using her vocabulary now, reinforcing the frame they were building around me. The unserious woman with the unserious career, whose only real purpose was to facilitate their comfort. I thought of the ultimatum. Choose to be a wife. This was what that meant. It meant my time, my professional commitments, were automatically inferior to their whims. It meant I was expected to absorb the insults and rearrange my life. Smiling all the while, I'll see what I can do, I said, my voice hollow. It was an agreement. It was a retreat, a tactical withdrawal into the cold, calculating place inside me that was starting to take notes. That night, lying beside Jake's sleeping form, the apartment silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't sleep. The day played on a loop behind my eyes. Marjorie's condescending smiles, Jake's eager complicity, the list, the little job, the expectation that I would drop everything for a flower show. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and took my laptop to the living room. The glow of the screen was the only light. I didn't open Pinterest for floral centerpieces. I didn't check work emails. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then I typed. The click-clack soft in the silent room. Search. Emotional manipulation in marriage signs. Search. Double standards, narcissistic husband. Search. Spousal alienation from family. Search. Financial control marriage signs. Search. How to document emotional abuse. The search results flooded the screen. A cold. Clinical validation of the churning in my gut. Articles, listed behaviors. Love bombing, followed by devaluation. Isolation from support systems. Moving the goalposts. Double standards. Gaslighting. Using guilt and obligation as weapons. I read with a terrifying, icy clarity. It was like reading Jake's biography. The love bombing in the early days, the extravagant dates. The constant affirmation, the gradual devaluation, the subtle digs at my friends, my career, my family, the isolation, the way he'd gotten annoyed when I spent too much time with Chloe, the moving goalposts. First it was about planning. Now it was about his mother's comfort trumping everything. The gaslighting that you're too emotional, you're overreacting, you're enmeshed. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't too sensitive. I was in a system, a well-documented, psychologically recognized system of control. He wasn't just a jerk, he was following a playbook, and I had been playing my assigned part. The appeaser, the smoother over, the one who absorbed the blows to keep the peace. I opened my phone's note app. The list of incidents looked different now under the stark light of this new knowledge. It wasn't just a log of grievances, it was evidence. I added to it, my fingers flying. December 23rd. Marjorie arrives. Called my career a little job/hobby. Jake echoed term. Expected me to cancel work commitment for flower show. No acknowledgement of cleaning/cooking. Treated as staff. I sat back, the blue light washing over me. The fury was still there, but it had shape now. It had a name. It was no longer a confusing, painful mess. It was a map, and on that map, I could see the traps, the dead ends, and maybe, just maybe, a path out. The path didn't look like a screaming match. It didn't look like tearful pleading. It looked like something harder. It looked like patience. It looked like strategy. It looked like biding my time, playing the part of the dutiful wife just a little while longer, while I gathered my resources and my strength. I closed the laptop. The apartment was dark, filled with the soft, regular breathing of the man who saw me as an extension of his wants. But I was no longer sleeping. I was watching, and I was, for the first time, wide awake. The day of the flower show was a study in exquisite humiliation. I spent the morning on edge, trying to reschedule the stakeholder call. My manager, Linda, was understanding but firm. Sadie, this is the final review before the holiday break. The VP needs to sign off. It's at 2, and it's non-negotiable. Understood, I said, my stomach nodding. I'll be there, even if I'm on mute in a hallway. At 1:15, Marjorie was still not ready. She decided her outfit needed changing. Then her hair wasn't quite right. Jake paced the living room, checking his watch. Sadie, can you hurry her? The tickets are for 1.45 entry. I'm not her valet. Jake, I said, pulling on my coat. I have a call at 2. I told you, I can drop you both at the conservatory, but I can't stay. His face darkened. You're seriously choosing a work call over Christmas with my mother? It's not Christmas. It's December 23rd, and it's not choosing. It's doing my job, a job that pays half our mortgage. Remember, he flinched, a rare crack in his armor. The money, the fact that my little job contributed equally, was a truth he preferred to ignore. Fine, he spat. Be that way. I'll get an Uber. Your priorities are crystal clear. The way he said it, it was the ultimate indictment. I drove to a quiet corner of a nearby parking garage and took the call on my laptop, the sound of rain pattering on the roof. My focus was split, half on the quarterly projections, half on the simmering resentment in my gut. I could picture them, strolling among the poinsettias, Marjorie leaning on his arm, no doubt dissecting my failings. So, career-focused. That one. Not very family-oriented. When I returned home, they were back, cozy on the couch with mugs of tea, a plate of the cookies I'd baked between them. The scene was a perfect diorama of domestic bliss from which I was conspicuously absent, and she simply didn't have the foresight to reserve in advance. Marjorie was saying, shaking her head, amateur hour. She was talking about someone else, but the judgment felt universal, aimed at me. There you are, Jake said, not looking up from his phone. Mom wants to go to that new French bistro on Michigan Avenue for Christmas Eve dinner. I made a reservation for 7.30. Did you check if I had anything planned? I asked, hanging up my damp coat. What would you have planned? It's Christmas Eve. I had planned to order Chinese food and watch It's a Wonderful Life, a silly tradition from my childhood that I'd kept, hoping maybe one year he'd join me. I never asked anymore. Nothing. I said, 7.30 is fine. Christmas Eve dawned with a brittle, gray sky. The tension in the apartment had a festive, glittering edge to it. Marjorie held court, critiquing my wrapping paper choices, so modern. I prefer the classic red and green. And the placement of ornaments on the tree, a bit sparse on this side. Don't you think? Jakey. By evening, I was a live wire wrapped in a black dress. The bistro was all candlelight and hushed tones, a place where passive aggression could be conducted in a whisper. Marjorie ordered for the table after a theatrical consultation with the sommelier, dismissing my suggestion of the halibut, too plain for the occasion. Dear, we'll have the duck confit, the coq au vin, and the scallops to start, and a bottle of the Paoli Fuis. The food arrived, artfully arranged. Marjorie took a bite of her duck and made a small, thoughtful sound. Adequate, not as good as the place in Lion. Of course. Jake, remember the duck in Lion? I do. Mom. Sublime. I ate my scallops in silence, the rich food turning to ash in my mouth. The conversation swirled around me to their shared memories, their opinions, their world. I was an audience of one, expected to provide appreciative silence. Then, as the dessert menus arrived, Marjorie leaned forward, her eyes locking onto me with a predatory gleam. So, Sadie, now that you're settled, she began, her gesture taking in the restaurant, the implied life. When can we expect some little ones? A grandmother shouldn't have to wait forever. You know, my tennis partner, Barbara, she's on her 4th grandchild. She's always showing me pictures. It's a bit tiresome, really, but one does envy her the opportunity. The question, so casually cruel, hung in the air. Jake shifted, not in discomfort, but in anticipation. This was the script. This was the pressure point they'd been working toward all week. I took a slow sip of water, buying a second. Children are a big decision, I said, my voice remarkably even. We're focusing on our careers right now. Careers. Marjorie said the word as if it were a slightly dirty joke. Jake has a career. You have a job. There's a difference. A mother's role is the highest calling. Don't you want to give your full attention to that? To creating a real home? Her eyes flicked to Jake, a silent reinforcement. This is what a real wife does. Jake reached over and patted my hand, a gesture that felt like a branding iron. Mom's just excited. Honey, and she has a point. We're not getting any younger. It might be time to reevaluate our priorities. Maybe scale back on some of the more demanding projects at work. There it was, the culmination, my value, my identity, my little job, all to be scaled back, shelved, to make room for the role they had designated for me, incubator and caretaker. I looked at his hand on mine, at his placid, expectant face, at his mother's smug, triumphant expression. The last thread of whatever had held me to this performance snapped. I carefully extracted my hand from under his. Excuse me, I said, my voice pleasant. I need to use the ladies' room. In the stark, marble-lined bathroom, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back had hollow eyes and a smile that had been fixed in place for too long. I thought of my mother's pale, apologetic face as she left. I thought of Chloe's voice. He's testing the perimeter fence. I thought of the search results glowing on my laptop in the dark. Double standards, isolation, control, the path, the cold, strategic path I'd glimpsed a few nights ago, crystallized. The time for biting was over. The trap they were so carefully laying for me, that a life of diminished expectations and servitude was one I would not walk into. But I wouldn't just run from it screaming. I would leave in a way that would echo in the silence of this perfect, empty life they designed. I would use his own rules against him. I walked back to the table, my heels clicking a steady, deliberate rhythm on the hardwood floor. They were leaning close, talking in low, pleased voices. They fell silent as I approached. Everything all right, dear? Marjorie asked, a hint of mock concern in her voice. Perfect, I said, gathering my purse. I've just gotten a bit of a headache. I'm going to head home, get some air. You two stay. Enjoy the rest of the evening. My treat. I pulled out my credit card and placed it on the table before Jake could react. His brow furrowed, a mix of confusion and irritation. Sadie, don't be dramatic. The desserts haven't even. It's fine, Jake, I said, my smile never wavering. Really, you and your mother should have this time. I insist. I leaned down and air-kissed Marjorie's cheek. Merry Christmas, Marjorie. I turned and walked out, feeling their stunned eyes on my back. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, waking me up completely. I didn't go home for air. I went home for war. The Uber ride was a blur. My heart was pounding, not with fear, but with a fierce, clear-headed purpose. I entered the dark, silent apartment. The Christmas tree twinkled mockingly. I went straight to the bedroom and pulled my largest suitcase from the closet. Then I walked to the guest room, Marjorie's room, and took my smaller carry-on from the top shelf. Back in our walk-in closet, I worked with a methodical, detached efficiency. I didn't grab everything. I took the clothes I loved, the ones that felt like me, the tailored blazers for work, the soft cashmere sweaters my mom had given me, the jeans that fit just right. I took my jewelry box, my important documents from the fire safe, my laptop and charger. I packed my skincare, my perfume, the photo album from my childhood. I was in the middle of carefully folding a silk blouse when I heard the key in the door. Their voices floated in. Marjorie's a trill of complaint about the cold. Jake's a low murmur. I didn't stop packing. Footsteps approached the bedroom. The door swung open. Jake stood there, still in his coat, his face a mask of bewildered anger. Behind him, I could see Marjorie hovering in the hallway, peering in. Jake's eyes swept from me to the open suitcase on the bed, half full of my things, to the carry-on on the floor. For a long moment, he just stared, his brain trying to process the incongruous image. His obedient wife, packing. What are you doing? The question came out flat, devoid of its usual commanding cadence. I continued placing the blouse in the suitcase, smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle. I'm packing. Jake, I can see that. Why are you packing? I finally looked at him. I made sure my face was calm, my gaze steady. This was the moment. I took a breath. The words I'd been composing all week, all month, perhaps for years, ready on my tongue. I'm leaving, I said, my voice clear and surprisingly gentle. You made it very clear that when a guest in this house makes you uncomfortable, the proper response is to remove yourself from the situation. I'm just following your lead. His mouth opened, then closed. He blinked. The prepared script, the accusations of drama, the reminders of my priorities, the guilt trips about Christmas and his mother, all of it evaporated in the face of my simple, brutal logic. I had weaponized his own philosophy. Marjorie pushed into the doorway. What on earth is going on? Sadie, what is this nonsense? It's not nonsense. Marjorie, I said, turning to her. My voice was still polite, almost conversational. Your visit has made it abundantly clear that I am a disruption to Jake's preferred ecosystem. My presence, my career, my very personality, they don't fit the life he wants. He values peace, routine, and a certain order above all else. My mother's brief, sick visit proved that. Your visit has confirmed it. Since I am clearly the source of the discomfort, the logical solution is for me to remove myself. Just as you taught me, Jake, when someone disrupts your peace, you remove the problem. I'm just saving you the trouble of asking. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. Jake's face had gone from confused to ashen. He was gaping at me, utterly speechless. His weapon, his self-righteous logic, his framework of blame had been taken from his hands and turned neatly, precisely, against him. He had no counter-argument. How could he? I was parroting his own creed back to him. Marjorie found her voice first, sputtering. This is outrageous. Jake, are you going to stand there and let her speak to us this way? To walk out on Christmas Eve? But Jake was still paralyzed, caught in the trap of his own making. To disagree with me now would be to repudiate everything he'd said to justify his treatment of my mother, everything that had underpinned his complaints. It would be an admission that his rules were arbitrary, designed only for his convenience, not based on any real principle. He was a man who lived by the letter of his own law, and I was using it to sue for divorce. You can't, this isn't the same. He finally managed, his voice a weak rasp. It's exactly the same, I said, zipping the first suitcase shut with a decisive, final sound. The only difference is the guest, and apparently, that's the only difference that matters to you. I looked at Marjorie, then back at him. You wanted a wife who prioritizes you, who puts your comfort, your mother's comfort, above everything that above her own family, her own job, her own sense of self. You've made that painfully clear. Well, here's the thing, Jake, I'm choosing to prioritize myself. And right now, that means leaving. I picked up the suitcase, rolling it toward the door. He didn't move to stop me. He just stood there, shattered, in the wreckage of his own double standard. Where are you going? The question was a whisper, stripped of all its former authority. I paused at the bedroom door, looking at him one last time. The man I'd married was gone, if he'd ever really existed. In his place was a stranger whose entitlement had finally met an immovable object. That, I said, pulling up the handle of my suitcase, the wheels clicking decisively on the hardwood floor, is no longer your concern. I walked past the stunned, silent figure of Marjorie, down the hall, and out the front door. I didn't slam it. I closed it softly, with a quiet, definitive click. The sound echoed in the silent hallway, a period at the end of a very long, painful sentence. Behind that door was his world, his rules, his empty, spotless ecosystem. Ahead of me was the cold, free night, and the first, terrifying, exhilarating breath of my own air. The cold Chicago air outside my apartment building was a physical shock, a slap of reality that sharpened everything. The wheels of my suitcase rattled over the sidewalk cracks, a frantic, hollow sound that matched the rhythm of my heart. I didn't look back. Looking back was for people who were uncertain, and in that moment, fueled by a white-hot clarity, I had never been more certain of anything. I hailed the first cab I saw. The driver, an older man with a kind face, took in my suitcase and my probably wild eyes. Where to, miss? He asked, his voice gentle. I gave him my mother's address in Glencoe. As the cab pulled away from the curb, from the life I was leaving, the adrenaline began to recede, leaving a violent tremble in its wake. I clasped my hands together in my lap to stop them from shaking. The quiet hum of the cab's heater, the blur of festive lights through the window, it all felt surreal. I did it. I actually left. 2 hours later, the cab turned onto my mother's familiar, tree-lined street. Her porch light was on, a single, welcoming beacon. I paid the driver, hauled my bags up the walk, and before I could even knock, the front door swung open. My mom stood there, wrapped in a robe, her reading glasses perched on her head. She took in the sight of me that the suitcase, the carry-on, my formal black dress under my winter coat, my smudged makeup, her face, which had initially registered surprise, softened into an expression of pure, uncomplicated understanding. She didn't ask a single question. Get in here, baby. You're letting all the heat out, she said, her voice thick. She pulled me inside, suitcase and all, and wrapped me in a hug that smelled of lavender and home. It was the kind of hug that said, I've got you. You're here now. The last of my brittle composure shattered. I buried my face in her shoulder and sobbed that great, heaving, ugly sobs of rage, of grief, of relief. She just held me, rubbing my back, murmuring, I know, honey, I know, let it out. When the storm finally passed, I was spent, hollowed out. She led me to the cozy, overstuffed couch in the living room, the one my dad had loved, and draped a crocheted blanket over my legs. Tea, she stated, a command, not a question. with a healthy shot of something stronger. She bustled in the kitchen. I heard the clink of a bottle, the whistle of the kettle. I just Saturday, staring at the low fire in the hearth, feeling numb. My phone, which I'd silenced, began to vibrate in my purse. I didn't need to look to know who it was. My mother returned with 2 steaming mugs, the scent of chamomile and brandy wafting toward me. She handed me one and sat beside me, tucking her feet underneath her. She waited. I left him. I said, the words raw in my throat. I gathered. She said softly, her eyes scanning my face, do you want to talk about the how or the why first? So, I told her everything, not just the Christmas Eve dinner, but the whole ugly tapestry of the last few weeks, that the list, the little job comments, the flower show ultimatum, the way he and Marjorie had tag-teamed me over dessert. I told her about the research I'd done, the cold, clinical terms that described my marriage. I told her about the note on my phone, the growing ledger of slights and cuts. She listened, her face a mask of growing fury and profound sorrow. When I finished, she took a long sip of her spiked tea. That little bastard, she said finally, her voice low and fierce. And that ice queen of a mother. I knew he was smug. I never thought he was calculated. I'm so sorry, Sadie. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you had to choose between being a good daughter and having a life. You didn't, Mom. He did, but I let him chase me out, she said, her eyes glistening. I should have stayed and fought for you. I should have told him exactly where he could shove his ecosystem. The image was so unexpected, so perfectly her, that a choked laugh escaped me. I'm glad you didn't. It would have given him more ammunition. He'd have called you hysterical and used it against me for years. She nodded, reaching over to squeeze my hand. You're smarter than I was, and braver. Walking out on Christmas Eve, with his mother there, that took steel. Honey, my phone vibrated again, skittering on the coffee table. We both looked at it. The screen lit up. Jake. Then it went dark. A second later, it lit up again. And again. Call. 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 He's going to want an explanation. I said dully. He's going to be so confused. Let him be confused. My mother said, her voice hardening. Let him sit in it. You don't owe him a damn thing, Sadie. Not a call. Not a text. Not a Dear John letter written in blood. Nothing. But the text started next. My phone buzzed incessantly, a frantic, angry insect on the table. Jake, 12:47 a.m. Sadie, this isn't funny. Where are you? Jake, 12:52 a.m. Mom is really upset. You ruined Christmas Eve. Are you happy? Jake, 1:05 a.m. Answer your phone. We need to talk about this like adults. Jake, 1:15 a.m. This is so childish. Just come home. We can talk. Jake, 1:30 a.m. Fine. Be that way. You're being irrational. You'll regret this. I showed the screen to my mom. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Save them, she said. Take screenshots. Send them to your email. Every single one. She was right. The clarity was returning. Cold and sharp. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, but not before opening my camera and meticulously screenshotting every text, every missed call, notification. I opened my email and started a new thread to myself with the subject line, Evidence. I attached the screenshots. I typed out the list from my Notes app and pasted it in. I described the ecosystem conversation, the list for Marjorie, the dinner. I wrote it all down, with dates and times as best I could remember. It was horrifying and empowering. I was building a case. Against my own husband, I slept for 12 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep of utter exhaustion. When I woke in my old bedroom, with its familiar floral wallpaper and the morning sun streaming in, the world felt different. The crushing weight of Jake's expectation was gone. In its place was a vast, terrifying emptiness, but also a fragile, burgeoning sense of possibility. Over a huge breakfast of pancakes and bacon, why mother's universal remedy for all ills that we talked logistics. You'll stay here as long as you need, she said, pouring more maple syrup than any adult should consume. But, honey, you need a lawyer. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. It's the day after Christmas. Mom, no one's working. My friend Nancy's daughter, Lisa, is a divorce attorney. A shark. She's probably checking her email even today. Let me call Nancy. By noon, I was on a Zoom call with Lisa Carson. She was in her late 40s, with a sharp blonde bob and eyes that missed nothing. She was wearing a tasteful sweater, but I could picture the power suit underneath. Sadie, she said, her voice crisp and professional. Your mom filled mine in on the broad strokes. I need to hear it from you, and I need you to be brutally honest. No minimizing. For the second time in 24 hours, I laid it out. The financial control. Jake handled all the investments, though I had full access. The emotional manipulation, the double standard with his mother, the career belittlement, the ultimatum. I sent her the evidence email. She listened, her fingers flying over a keyboard, occasionally asking for clarification. And the apartment, the deed. Whose name is it in? Both of ours. We bought it together. The down payment was 60% from my inheritance from my dad, 40% from his savings. The mortgage is joint. Lisa's eyebrows went up slightly. Good. That's very good. The inheritance portion will factor in. But joint ownership in Illinois is a community property state. It's a marital asset. She leaned closer to the screen. Now, the most important thing right now is your immediate safety. Has he made any threats? Do you feel physically unsafe? I thought about it. Jake's anger was cold, contemptuous, manipulative. I'd never seen him throw anything, never seen him raise a fist. But the threat had always been emotional, psychological. No, not physically, but the emotional and psychological abuse is well documented in your notes. The texts are classic, shifting from anger to guilt-tripping to insulting. It shows a pattern of coercion. Now, you've left the marital home. That's a significant action. He may escalate. I want you to save every communication. Do not block him, but do not respond. Let him dig his own grave. Every angry, pleading, threatening text is a gift to us. What do I do now? I asked, feeling both terrified and immensely grateful for her steely competence. First, we file for legal separation. It starts the clock on asset division. Given what you've told me, I think we have a strong case for negotiating a favorable settlement. His behavior, especially in front of witnesses, his mother, establishes a pattern of emotional abuse that the court will consider when dividing assets and considering spousal support. Though with your income, that's likely a non-issue. The key is the house. You want to stay there? I thought of the cold, pristine apartment. Every surface a reminder of his control. No, I want out. I want my share of the equity, and I want to be done with it. Good. That simplifies things. We'll push for a quick sale. Division of proceeds with a credit for your larger down payment. My retainer is $5,000. Can you access that without him knowing? I nodded. I had a personal savings account. He'd always rolled his eyes at that why frivolous fund. It had $15,000 in it. Yes. Excellent. I'll have my assistant send over the engagement letter. Sign it. Send the retainer. We'll file first thing tomorrow. The goal is to have him served at his office. It sets a tone. A faint, grim smile touched her lips. In the meantime, live your life. Go to work. See your friends. Do not engage with him. You have the upper hand right now. He's confused and off balance. Let him stay that way. When the call ended, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years. I had a plan. I had a shark. I had agency. That evening, the doorbell rang. My mom peeked through the curtain. Pizza delivery, she announced, but her smile was wide. It was Chloe, laden with 2 pizza boxes, a bottle of wine, and a bag from my favorite bakery. The cavalry has arrived, Chloe announced, kicking the door shut behind her. She dropped the food, enveloped me in a hug that smelled of perfume and cold air, then held me at arm's length. Let me look at you. Puffy eyes, but a new glint of fuck around and find out in them. I approve. She turned to my mom. Eleanor, you're a saint. I brought you a chocolate babka as a bribe for letting me crash the party. It turned into a slumber party for the newly separated. We ate pizza straight from the box on the living room floor. I told Chloe everything about the grand exit, repeating the line I'd used on Jake. Chloe held with laughter, raising her glass of wine. Oh, I wish I could have seen his face. You used his own bullshit against him. That's poetic justice. Sad. Brilliant. We dissected Lisa's advice. We brainstormed what to do with my half of the apartment equity. Chloe, ever the strategist, pulled out her laptop. Okay, so you sell the soulless monolith. You get, what, maybe $200,000 after the mortgage? You buy a cute condo, in your name only. You get a dog, a big, slobbery dog that Jake would hate. You live happily ever after. It's not that simple, I said, but I was smiling. It is that simple. Chloe insisted. The hard part was leaving. You did that. The rest is paperwork and spite. And we are excellent at spite. My mom raised her wine glass. To spite, and to my daughter, who finally remembered she has a spine of titanium. We clinked glasses. For the first time in a long time. I felt light. I felt supported. My phone, charging on the counter, lit up again. Another string of texts. I got up and looked. The tone had changed. Jake, 8:22 p.m. Sadie, please, we need to talk. I'm sorry about last night. I was stressed. Mom's gone. Can we please just talk? Jake, 8:45 p.m. I don't understand what you want from me. You just left. How are we supposed to fix this if you won't talk to me? Jake, 9:15 p.m. I'm worried about you. Where are you staying? Are you safe? Please just let me know you're okay. The love bombing phase. Chloe intoned, reading over my shoulder. He's swinging from anger to concern. Classic. He's panicking. He's lost control. Don't answer. My mom said, echoing Lisa. Not a word. I didn't. But I took a screenshot of each message and added it to the file. I watched him cycle, in real time, through the abuser's playbook. Rage, devaluation, and now, hoovering. It was like watching a nature documentary about a particularly predictable predator. Later, as we were curled up under blankets, watching an old rom-com, Chloe muted the TV during commercial. Okay, so legal stuff is in motion. Practicalities are handled. But I have to ask, what do you want? I mean, beyond the divorce, the condo, the hypothetical dog. He put you through hell. He made your mom feel like garbage. He doesn't just get to be served papers and go on with his life thinking he was right. Does he? I'd been thinking the same thing. The cold, clean break Lisa advocated for was the smart move, the safe move, but it left a sour taste in my mouth. Jake would spin this to his friends, to his family, to himself. He'd be the long-suffering husband, blindsided by his hysterical, ungrateful wife. He'd learn nothing. He'd just look for a new woman to control, one with weaker boundaries. No, I said slowly, the idea forming as I spoke, taking shape in the warm, safe cocoon of my mother's living room. He doesn't. Lisa wants me to let him dig his own grave with texts. But what if I helped him along? What if I gave him enough rope to hang himself in public, where his mom and all his friends can see the noose? Chloe's eyes gleamed. I'm listening. I go back, I said, the words feeling dangerous and right. Not to stay. Not for a second. I go back. Tell him I'm willing to talk, to work on things. I play the part, the remorseful wife, scared and confused. And while I'm there, I gather more. I make sure Marjorie sees who he really is. I make sure his friends hear it from his own mouth. I let him think he's won me back, just long enough to set the stage. And then, in front of everyone, I pull the curtain back. I show them the pathetic little man behind it, not with a whisper, but with a bang he'll never forget. My mom was staring at me, a mixture of concern and fierce pride on her face. Sadie, that's risky. What if he hurts you? He won't, I said, and I believed it. His power was in manipulation, in quiet control, in making me doubt myself, in a public showdown, with witnesses. He was impotent. His whole identity is about appearing perfect, reasonable, in control. He'd never make a scene. He wouldn't know how. Chloe was grinning. It's a hell of a plan. High risk, high reward. You'd need to be an actress. You'd need to be stone cold. I can do it, I said. And for the first time, I knew I could. The woman who had walked out on Christmas Eve was gone. In her place was someone harder, sharper, with a score to settle. I'll let Lisa know the broad strokes, for legal protection. But I'm not just going to walk away. I'm going to make sure he remembers why I left. Every time he looks in a mirror, for the rest of his life, I want him to see the man who was too stupid to know what he had until he lost it in the most spectacular way possible. I looked at my two favorite women in the world, their faces illuminated by the flickering TV light. I had a safe harbor. I had a legal gladiator. And now, I had a mission. I'm going to give him exactly what he wants. I said, my voice quiet and steady, just long enough to take everything he values away from him, starting with his precious, spotless reputation. 3 days after Christmas, I stood outside my .our Lincoln Park apartment building, a familiar wave of nausea crashing over me. It wasn't from fear, but from the sheer, visceral memory of the atmosphere inside, the sterile perfection, the quiet judgment, the weight of Jake's expectations. My suitcase, now repacked with a carefully curated selection of clothes meant to signal contrite but hopeful, felt like a prop. I was an actress walking onto a hostile stage. I'd spent the morning on a final strategy call with Chloe and a brief, cautious one with Lisa. What you're describing is a legal tightrope, Sadie, Lisa had said, her voice tinny through my car's Bluetooth. Do not, under any circumstances, provoke him into a situation that could be construed as a physical threat. Do not threaten him. Your goal is documentation and witness testimony. Record conversations if you're in a one-party consent state. Illinois is. But for God's sake, be smart. The second it feels unsafe, you walk. Your retribution is not worth your safety. It's not about retribution. I'd said, only half lying. It's about clarity. For everyone, Chloe's plan was more granular. Okay, the party. We need a mix. People who like you, people who are neutral, and at least one who's a gossip and adores Jake. I'll handle the invites. A post-holiday, pre-New Year's, spontaneous gathering. Jake loves to show off the apartment. He won't say no. You just have to set the scene. Now, taking a deep, bracing breath of the cold air, I texted Jake. My fingers, steady with purpose, tapped out the lie. Sadie, for 15 p.m. I'm outside. Can we talk? The 3 dots appeared instantly, then disappeared. A full minute passed. He was making me wait, reasserting control even now. Finally, Jake, 4:16 p.m. The doors unlocked. I let myself in. The apartment was immaculate. Of course, the Christmas tree was gone, dismantled and stored with a military efficiency I knew was his work. It was as if the holiday, and my dramatic exit, had never happened. He was standing in the living room, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual but emanating a tense, wounded superiority. Sadie, he said, his voice carefully modulated to sound weary. Disappointed. Jake, I left my suitcase by the door, a deliberate symbol of impermanence. I didn't take off my coat. I owe you an apology. His eyebrows lifted slightly, a flicker of surprise and swift victory in his eyes. This was the script he'd hoped for. For which part? He asked, the condescension a subtle undertone. For leaving the way I did. On Christmas Eve, in front of your mother. I kept my gaze down, playing the chastened wife. It was an emotional response. I was hurt, and I overreacted. He sighed, a long, performative exhale. He walked to the sofa and Saturday, gesturing for me to join him. I remained standing, near the armchair. It was more than an overreaction. Sadie, it was a betrayal. You humiliated me. You humiliated my mother in front of a restaurant full of people. And then you just vanished. Do you have any idea how worried I was? Worried about your image. Not about me, I thought. I know. I'm sorry. I needed space to think. I let my voice tremble. Just a little. About us. About what you said about priorities. He leaned forward, his posture softening into that of a concerned teacher. And what have you concluded? I took a shaky breath. That you were right. About a lot of it. I have been prioritizing the wrong things. Letting outside stresses work. Family drama affect our marriage. I haven't been the partner you need. The words tasted like ash, but I sold them with wide, sincere eyes. He nodded slowly, a king granting a tentative pardon. It's a start. Recognizing the problem is the first step. This thing with your mother, it highlighted a fundamental disconnect in how we view our home. This is our sanctuary, Sadie, not a crash pad for every family crisis. I see that now. I whispered. And with your mom, I should have been more enthusiastic. I was feeling defensive, and I took it out on her visit. That wasn't fair to you. He almost smiled. The capitulation was like a drug to him. Mom is a lot. I know that, but she's my mother. She wants what's best for us, and she sees a strong, traditional family as the bedrock of a good life. There's wisdom in that. There is. I agreed. Nausea rising again. I changed tack. A small test. Chloe actually helped me see some of this. She said I was being stubborn. His face clouded at her name. But the context, Chloe criticizing me soothed him. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. I'm glad you're finally listening to someone with sense. Bingo. He's buying it, the sheer, arrogant gullibility of it was staggering. He wanted so badly to be right, to be the magnanimous forgiver, that he'd ignore every red flag. I was thinking, I said, venturing a small step forward. Maybe we need to reconnect. Not just the two of us, but with our friends. We've been so insular. I feel like I pushed everyone away. What if we had a few people over? Something casual. Before New Year's. A sort of fresh start. He considered it. Hosting showcased the apartment. His curated life. His ability to command a scene. It proved to the world that the Christmas Eve incident was a minor blip. Now resolved. That's not a bad idea. He conceded. Who were you thinking? Oh, just a few. Mark and Ben from your work. Chloe. Of course. Maybe Stephanie and David? Stephanie was the gossip. Married to David, who idolized Jake's career trajectory. Stephanie talks too much, he said, but I could see he liked the idea of an audience. But fine. Keep it small. Elegant. I don't want a frat party. Of course not. I said, I'll handle everything. You won't have to lift a finger. Consider it my first step towards getting my priorities straight. The look he gave me was one of deep satisfaction. The system was working. The errant component was realigning itself. Okay, he said, finally standing and approaching me. He put a hand on my arm, a possessive, pacifying gesture. Okay, let's try again. But Sadie, this is it. The last chance. I need to see real change. Permanently. I looked up at him, letting my eyes shimmer with manufactured tears of gratitude. You will. I promise. I moved my suitcase back into the bedroom. The charade had begun. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in duplicity. I became the perfect Stepford wife. If Stepford wives were secretly gathering forensic evidence, I planned the party with a meticulousness that would have made Marjorie weep with pride. I ordered exquisite, fussy canapes from a boutique caterer Jake loved. I selected wines, arranged flowers, made sure every surface gleamed. I communicated with Jake only through the lens of deference. Do you prefer the Burgundy or the Bordeaux for the cheese plate? Sweetie, is 8 p.m. too late for Mark? Since he has the kids, I fed his ego, and he ate it up, his demeanor thawing into a patronizing benevolence. He'd come home from work and inspect my progress, offering minor corrections. The napkins should be linen, not paper. It makes a statement. I'd nod eagerly and make the change. All the while, the voice recorder app on my phone lived in my pocket, a silent witness. I captured him holding forth on his sanctuary theory again. I got him complaining about Chloe's negative influence. I even managed to steer him into a rehashing of my mother's visit. It's just about respect, he said one evening, as I folded linen napkins into useless, intricate shapes. Your mother doesn't respect our boundaries. She thinks just because she's family, she has a right to disrupt our lives. My mother would never do that. She understands protocol. You're so right, I murmured, the phone in my robe pocket capturing every syllable. It's a generational thing. I think. A different understanding of manners. Exactly. Manners. He seemed pleased I'd found the right word. The night of the party, I dressed carefully to sleek. Expensive dress Jake had bought me. One that made me look the part of the successful, compliant spouse. I applied my makeup. My hand steady. I felt eerily calm. This was my opening night. The guests arrived in a wave of cheerful, holiday-weary energy. Mark and Ben from the finance firm, already a little buzzed. Stephanie and David. Stephanie's eyes immediately scanning the room for drama. And Chloe, who swept in, gave me a dramatic, knowing hug, and immediately handed Jake a bottle of very nice scotch. Peace offering, she said with a dazzling smile. I hear I've been branded a bad influence. Jake, disarmed by the flattery and the scotch, gave a stiff laugh. All in the past. Chloe, we're turning over a new leaf. The party settled into a low hum. Wine flowed. The canapes were praised. Jake held court by the fireplace, holding forth on the real estate market. I played the gracious hostess, refilling glasses, laughing at jokes, a ghost in my own home. The pivot point came an hour in. I was in the kitchen, plating the second wave of food, when I heard Stephanie's loud, carrying voice from the living room. That's so awful about your mom. Sadie, is she doing better? I carried the platter out, setting it on the coffee table. She's much better. Thanks. Steph, it was just a nasty bug. I felt so bad she had to cut her visit short. Jake, from his throne by the fire, shifted slightly. Mark, oblivious, said, "Oh, your mom was here? I didn't know she was in town. Just for a couple days before Christmas," I said lightly, meeting Jake's eyes across the room. I gave him a small, reassuring smile. It was a last-minute thing. She wasn't feeling well, and I just couldn't bear the thought of her alone in that big house. I turned to the group, my voice taking on a confessional, apologetic tone. I'm afraid I threw Jake's famous ecosystem totally out of whack. He's such a creature of habit. I should have known better. The room chuckled. Jake forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. This wasn't in the script. Chloe pounced, her tone deceptively light. "Oh, please, what's a little matriarchal TLC?" I'm sure Jake was a saint about it, playing nurse and everything. She took a sip of wine, her gaze innocent. Jake cleared his throat. It was a disruption, but we managed. His words were tight. Stephanie, the gossip hound, sensed blood in the water. A disruption? Oh, come on. Jake, it's her mom. You're not one of those guys who's weird about their mother-in-law, are you? She nudged David, who chuckled dutifully. The pressure was on him. He had to perform the role of the good, reasonable husband. I could see him scrambling. It's not about being weird, Stephanie. It's about mutual respect and advance planning. Sadie knows I value our routine. Spontaneity on that scale is challenging for our dynamic. I watched the faces in the room. Mark and Ben looked vaguely uncomfortable, not wanting to be in the middle of marital stuff. David nodded as if Jake had said something profound. Stephanie's eyes were wide with fascinated horror. Chloe's expression was one of pure, undiluted mischief. Wow, Chloe said, drawing the word out. So, like, a sick parent is less important than your workout schedule? That's a bold prioritization strategy. Jake, very efficient. Jake's cheeks flushed. You're simplifying it. Chloe, it's about the principle of the home as a shared, respectful space. Right, right. Chloe nodded, as if she finally understood. Shared and respectful. So, like, when your mom was here for Christmas, that was totally fine because it was planned. No disruption to the, what did you call it? The ecosystem. She looked at me. Sadie, you were a trooper that week, running around getting that special milk, the flowers, the salmon. I barely heard from you. You really committed to the no disruption policy for Marjorie's visit. Kudos. The comparison was now laid bare, publicly, by someone other than me. I saw Stephanie's head swivel between Jake and me, her journalist's mind connecting dots at lightning speed. Jake was floundering. That's different. My mother's visits are planned. They're anticipated. It's a mutual agreement. Ah, Chloe said, snapping her fingers. So it's not about the act-off having guessed. It's about the type-off guest. And who gets to define what type is acceptable. Got it. Crystal clear. The room was silent. The casual party atmosphere was gone, replaced by a thick, awkward tension. Jake was glaring at Chloe, but he couldn't blow up at her without looking unhinged in front of his colleagues. I chose that moment to swoop in, playing the peacemaker, the dutiful wife smoothing over her husband's awkwardness. I placed a hand gently on Jake's arm. Honey, it's okay. Chloe's just teasing. She doesn't understand how important your routines are to you. I looked at the group, my smile placating. Jake just really values our peace. And he's right. I should have planned better with my mom. And I was happy to do everything for Marjorie. It's how I show love for his family. It's just different standards, I guess, for his family versus mine. I said it softly, sadly, as if it were a gentle, resigned realization about my own failings, but the words hung in the air, stark and undeniable, different standards, for his family versus mine. Stephanie's mouth was a perfect O of scandalized delight. Mark and Ben studied their shoes. David looked confused, as if the math wasn't matching. Jake was utterly cornered. To deny it was to call me a liar in front of everyone. To agree was to admit to being a hypocrite. He stood there, his jaw working, his face a mask of impotent rage. The perfect, controlled image was cracking, and his friends were watching it happen. He finally managed a strangled sound. This is a private matter, and I think it's inappropriate to discuss it at a party. The words were a retreat, an admission of defeat wrapped in a scold. You're absolutely right, sweetie, I said, patting his arm, my voice dripping with faux remorse. I'm so sorry, everyone. My fault for bringing up a sore subject. More wine? The Bordeaux is really opening up nicely. I moved to pour. The perfect hostess, once more. But the damage was done. The seed was planted. For the rest of the evening, the party was strained. Jake was sullen and quiet. Stephanie couldn't stop shooting me looks of avid curiosity. Chloe held court, effortlessly steering conversation to safer topics. But the undercurrent remained. As the guests left, the goodbyes were hurried, awkward. Stephanie hugged me extra tight and whispered, "Call me for coffee. Soon." David clapped Jake on the back, a gesture that now seemed pitying. Mark and Ben mumbled their thanks and fled. When the door closed on the last of them, the silence in the apartment was volcanic. I started calmly clearing glasses, the clink of crystal abnormally loud. Jake stood in the center of the living room, watching me. The benevolent mask was gone. Completely. What was left was cold. Pure fury. What? He said, his voice a low, dangerous vibration. Was that? I turned, a dishcloth in my hand, my expression one of innocent confusion. What was what? Honey? The party? I thought it went well. Considering. Don't you dare. He hissed, taking a step toward me. You and Chloe. You set me up. You made me look like a monster in front of my friends. I stopped pretending. I let the placating smile fade, meeting his gaze with a calm that seemed to infuriate him further. I didn't make you look like anything, Jake. I simply stated facts. And Chloe asked logical questions. If you looked like something tonight, it's because that's what you are. A man who has one set of rules for my family and another for his own. They all saw it. They all heard it. He was shaking now, with a rage so profound it seemed to choke him. You vindictive bitch. After everything, after I took you back, gave you a chance, this is how you repay me? By humiliating me? You humiliated yourself, I said quietly, my hand slipping into the pocket of my dress, my thumb finding the record button on my phone. All I did was stop helping you hide it. How does it feel, Jake, to have people see the double standard? To have Stephanie, of all people, know what you really think of my mother? He took another step, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if Lisa was wrong, if the emotional abuser would tip into something physical. But he stopped, his fists clenched at his sides. His anger seemed to collapse in on itself, turning into something petulant and whining. You've ruined everything. My friends, they'll talk. They'll think I'm some kind of ogre. Yes, I agreed simply. They will, because you acted like one. To my sick mother, and to me, for years. Welcome to consequences. The finality in my voice seemed to finally break through his rage. A flicker of something else. Panic. Perhaps. Crossed his face. What do you want? What is this? Some kind of punishment? It's clarity, I said, echoing my words to Lisa. I pulled my hand from my pocket, the phone safely recording. It's the truth, and it's just the beginning. Jake, the life you wanted, the obedient wife, the spotless reputation, the unquestioned control, it's over. I'm not coming back. I was never coming back. I just needed to make sure everyone understood why. I saw the understanding dawn in his eyes, slow and horrifying. The reconciliation, the deferential wife, the party, it was all a setup, a brutal, public dismantling of his narrative. He hadn't won me back. He'd been played. The color drained from his face. He looked suddenly, profoundly small. You, he whispered. You planned this. All of it. I didn't answer. I just picked up the final platter from the coffee table, the one with the exquisite, uneaten canapes, and walked past him into the kitchen. I had what I needed. The witnesses, the recording, the look on his face. The performance was over. The real show was about to begin. The silence that followed my words in the gleaming kitchen wasn't peaceful. It was the taut, high-pitched hum of a wire about to snap. Jake stood frozen in the living room doorway, the raw, ugly truth of the last 2 days dawning on him with a brutality that seemed to shrink him physically. The confident posture, the entitled smirk, all of it was gone, leaving behind a stunned, pale shell. You planned this, he repeated, his voice a disbelieving whisper that grated into something louder, more desperate. All of it, the apology, the party, the questions. It was all a trick, a setup to make me look bad. I placed the platter in the sink with a deliberate clatter. Turning to face him, the performance was over. The mask of the contrite wife was gone, replaced by a calm, implacable coldness that I saw register in his eyes. No, Jake, it wasn't a trick to make you look bad. It was an opportunity for you to be seen. There's a difference. You did the talking. You provided the evidence. I just stopped editing the feed. You manipulative bitch. The word exploded from him, venomous and final. It was the last refuge of a man with no argument left. You lied. You came crawling back, pretending you wanted to fix things. And you were just gathering ammunition. I came back to get the truth on the record. I said, my voice steady. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted, and we both knew it. And as for lying, you're the master. Jake, you lied for years. You lied about respecting me. You lied about us being a team. You lied with every condescending pat on the head. Every time you called my career a little job. Every time you rolled your eyes at my mother and called it setting a boundary. I just told one tactical untruth to expose a lifetime of yours. I'd say I'm still behind on points. He took a step forward, his fists clenched, his face mottled with rage and humiliation. You have no idea what you've done. You've ruined everything. What have I ruined? Exactly? I asked, genuinely curious. Your ability to control me? Your reputation as the perfect, reasonable husband among people whose opinions you actually care about? The fantasy that you can treat people like disposable service staff and still be loved? Yeah, I ruined that. Good. Before he could form another spluttering retort, a new sound cut through the tension, a key turning in the front door lock. We both turned. The door swung open, and Marjorie stood there, dressed in a stylish travel outfit, her small roller bag beside her. Her face was a carefully composed mask of maternal concern, but her eyes were sharp, darting between Jake's apoplectic expression and my calm, defiant stance. She'd clearly come back early, likely prompted by a frantic phone call from her son after the party guests left. Jake? Sadie? I let myself in. I had a feeling. Her voice was the familiar, controlled cadence, but there was a new wariness in it. I could hear raised voices from the hall. What on earth is going on? The party couldn't have been that dreadful. Jake seized on her arrival like a lifeline. Mom, thank God. You won't believe what she's done. He gestured at me, a frantic, sweeping motion. It was all an act. Her coming back, being sorry. The party, IT was all a scheme to humiliate me in front of my friends. Marjorie's brows drew together. She looked at me, her gaze assessing. Sadie, is this true? I met her eyes, no longer bothering with the pretense of deference. It's true that I came back with a purpose, Marjorie, to show Jake and anyone else who needed to see the truth about our marriage. The double standard you both seem so fond of. Double standard? She repeated, her tone icy. This is about your mother again, isn't it? You simply cannot let that go. You're determined to poison my son's life because of your own childish attachments. No, I said, shaking my head slowly. This is about the weekend you were here. It's about the list Jake gave me. I walked to the kitchen island, opened a drawer, and pulled out the printed list he'd left for me. I held it up. For Mom's visit. Deep clean. Stock specific groceries. Plan menus. Get tickets. I was the project manager for your comfort, Marjorie, and I did it, meticulously. Jake scoffed. So, you're the wife. That's what you're supposed to do. Am I? I asked softly, turning the paper so they could both see the header. Then where was my list? Jake, where was the deep clean for my mother? The lactose-free milk? The hypoallergenic bedding? The effort to make her feel special? All she got was your contempt, your eye rolls, and a speech about disrupting your ecosystem before she was even well enough to drive herself home. Marjorie shifted slightly, a flicker of something, not guilt, but a dawning, uncomfortable recognition of the asymmetry crossing her face. That was a different situation. It was unplanned, an imposition, an imposition. I echoed. My sick mother was an imposition. Your planned Christmas visit was a sacred event. That's the double standard. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. You want to know what's really going on? Marjorie, let me show you the man you raised. Jake lunged forward. Don't you dare. Stay where you are. Jake, I said, my voice dropping to a warning growl that stopped him cold. I'd never used that tone with him before. I tapped the screen, and the audio from the party night began to play. My phone's speaker filling the silent apartment. Jake's voice, calm and superior. Your mother doesn't respect our boundaries. She thinks just because she's family, she has a right to disrupt our lives. My mother would never do that. She understands protocol. My recorded voice, placating that you're so right. It's a generational thing. I think, a different understanding of manners. Jake, exactly manners. I stopped the playback. Marjorie was staring at her son, her expression unreadable. Jake looked like he'd been gut punched. He said that? Marjorie asked, her voice thin. He says things like that all the time. I replied, swiping on my phone. I pulled up the note app, the running ledger of his behavior. I didn't read it all. I selected highlights. My voice flat and factual. November 12th, called my promotion a cute little victory. November 28th, said Chloe was a toxic influence and I should see her less. December 18th, presented me with the list for your visit. Called it being organized. December 23rd, told me to cancel a critical work meeting to take you to a flower show. And when I said I couldn't, he said, you're seriously choosing a work call over Christmas with my mother? I looked up at Marjorie. My career, my best friend, my time. All of it is automatically less important than his comfort or your whims. I scrolled further, and then there are the texts from after I left. Would you like to hear the progression? From anger, you ruined Christmas Eve. Are you happy? I read in a flat monotone. To attempted guilt. I'm worried about you. Where are you staying? 2. Finally, when I came back playing my part, condescending approval. I'm glad you're finally listening to someone with sense. It's a textbook cycle. Marjorie. Devalue. Discard. Hoover. I have screenshots of all of it. Jake was breathing heavily, his eyes wide with a kind of horrified panic. That's private. You can't. That's illegal. Illinois is a one-party consent state. Jake, I was a party to those conversations. It's perfectly legal, and it's all going to my lawyer. I turned my attention fully to Marjorie, who now looked pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. You wanted a daughter-in-law who knew her place, who prioritized your son, and by extension, you, who treated your visits like state occasions. You raised a son who believes he is entitled to that, who believes the woman in his life is there to manage his ecosystem, bolster his ego, and bear children who will continue his perfect bloodline. You wanted a traditional wife for him. You got one who finally read the fine print on that particular contract and found it to be slavery. Now you wait just a minute. Marjorie began, her composure cracking. No, you wait. I cut her off, the full force of my anger finally unleashed. Cold and precise, you stood in my home and called my life's work a little job. You hinted I was less of a woman for not giving you grandchildren on your schedule. You ate the food I cooked, slept on the linens I washed, and never once thanked me. You only criticized, and your son watched you do it, and he learned. He learned that it was acceptable to treat me that way, that my value was in what I could do for him, not in who I am. You didn't just raise a mama's boy. Marjorie, you co-signed a tyrant. The apartment was dead silent. Marjorie looked utterly stricken, not by guilt for my pain, I realized, but by the catastrophic failure of her project. Her son, her masterpiece, was being exposed as a flawed, petty, unlovable man, and it was her methodology that was being indicted. Jake found his voice, a broken, pleading thing. Mom, she's twisting everything. She's crazy. Stop it. Jacob, Marjorie said, the words quiet but sharp. She didn't look at him. She was still staring at me, as if seeing me for the first time. The perfect, pliable facade was gone, and in its place was a woman of steel. And it terrified her. Just stop. I picked up a manila envelope from the counter where I'd placed it earlier. I walked to Jake and held it out. He didn't take it. This is from my attorney, Lisa Carson. It's a petition for dissolution of marriage and a proposed separation agreement. You'll be formally served at your office tomorrow, but I thought you'd appreciate the courtesy of seeing it first, given the evidence of emotional abuse and the financial contributions. We're asking for the immediate listing of the apartment, with the proceeds divided 60/40ths in my favor, reflecting my larger down payment. You keep your car and your retirement account. I keep mine. It's more than fair, considering I could go for spousal support given the documented pattern of economic control. But I don't want your money. I just want out. He stared at the envelope as if it were a live snake. You're divorcing me? I ended our marriage on Christmas Eve. Jake, this is just the paperwork. And the move-out notice. The apartment is going on the market. You need to be out in 30 days. I've already secured temporary housing. You can stay with a friend, or with your mother. I glanced at Marjorie, whose face was a rigid mask. I'm sure her guest room protocol is impeccable. You can't kick me out of my own home. He shouted, the last vestige of his control shattering. I can, and I am, I said, my voice never rising. I've already consulted a lawyer. Remember? My name is on the deed. I have every right to occupy it and to petition for exclusive possession during the proceedings, which I have, given the documented emotional distress. It's likely to be granted. You can fight it, of course, drag it out, spend a fortune on legal fees, and all the while, your friends will be talking about what they heard at the party. Your colleagues will wonder why you got served at work. Your mother will have to explain to her tennis club why her perfect son is getting divorced after his wife publicly exposed him as a hypocrite. Or you can sign the papers, take your share of the money, and slink away to start over with whatever story you can salvage. Your choice. I was presenting him with his own ultimatum, and it was beautifully, brutally fair. Fight and be publicly destroyed, or concede and disappear with a shred of dignity. He was a man who valued appearances above all else. I knew which he'd choose. He looked from me to his mother, seeking an ally, a rescue. Marjorie wouldn't meet his eyes. She was looking at the floor, her shoulders slumped in defeat. The reality of the evidence, the public humiliation, the cold. Legal terms.it was a language she understood, and it told her the battle was lost. Her son had been outmaneuvered, completely and utterly. You'll regret this, Jake whispered, but the threat was hollow, the last gasp of a defeated man. The fire was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hollow, bewildered shock. I already told you, I said, picking up the small overnight bag I'd pre-packed and left by the kitchen entrance. The only thing I regret is not doing it the first time I saw you roll your eyes at my mother. Consider this your eviction notice. Jake, from my life, the locks will be changed tomorrow. Your things will be packed and put in storage at your expense. Communicate through my lawyer. I walked to the door. I stopped and looked at Marjorie one last time. Goodbye, Marjorie. I hope the next woman you try to mold has less self-respect. It'll make the process easier for you both. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I didn't look back. I walked to the elevator, my heels clicking a steady, final rhythm on the polished floor. Behind me, through the closing door, I heard the first, raw sound I choked, furious sob that was unmistakably Jake's. It was followed by Marjorie's voice, sharp and disgusted. For God's sake, Jacob, pull yourself together. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing me in peaceful, silent solitude. The hum of its descent was the only sound. I leaned against the wall, the adrenaline finally receding, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion and a quiet, unshakable certainty. It was over. He was broken, not by screaming, not by begging, but by the inexorable, calculated application of truth, evidence, and his own pathetic rules. I had taken his ecosystem, studied it, and introduced a predator he could not control, me. As I emerged into the cold night air, my phone vibrated. A text from Chloe. Well, don't leave me hanging. I'm vibrating out of my skin over here. I typed back, a slow smile spreading across my face for the first time in what felt like years. It's done. He's finished. Details tomorrow. Bring champagne. I hailed a cab, giving the driver my mother's address. I was going home. The war was over. I had won. The first real day of the rest of my life began not with a fanfare, but with the soft, buttery light of a Bahamian sunrise streaming through the slats of our villa's blinds. I was on a lounge chair on the balcony, a cup of coffee cooling beside me, listening to the gentle wash of the turquoise water against the sand. The silence was a physical presence, thick and sweet, utterly devoid of judgment, expectation, or the phantom click of a study door. The sliding glass door opened, and my mom stepped out, wrapped in a colorful caftan. She sank into the chair next to mine with a contented sigh. I could get used to this view, she said. Me too. I took a sip of coffee. Thank you, Mom, for this, for everything. Don't thank me. This is your victory lap. I'm just the grateful plus one. She looked at me, her eyes soft. How do you feel? I considered the question, the frantic energy of the confrontation, the cold calculus of the plan, had faded. In its place was a profound, spreading sense of peace, punctuated by moments of giddy disbelief. I feel light, like I've been carrying a bag of rocks for years and finally set down, and a little terrified, in a good way, like standing at the edge of a high dive. That's exactly how you should feel, she said. The rocks were his problems he made you carry. The high dive is your future, and you've always been a hell of a swimmer. Sadie. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a new email notification. The subject line, Carson Legal. Proposed settlement agreement executed. My breath hitched. I opened it. It was from Lisa, with a scanned PDF attached. The cover note was typically brusque. Sadie. He signed. No changes. Faster than I anticipated. The listing agreement for the apartment is also executed. Proceeding per plan. Enjoy the beach. LC. I showed the screen to my mom. He signed. It's over. She read the email, and a huge, triumphant smile broke across her face. She raised her imaginary glass. To the ecosystem. May it thrive without its most toxic element. I laughed. A real, free sound that echoed over the quiet beach. He'd folded. Of course he had. Fighting would have meant discovery, scrutiny, and the exposure of the audio recordings and notes in a courtroom. It would have meant his colleagues, his friends, the world, seeing the evidence compiled in cold, clinical detail. Jake's entire life was built on the perception of control and reasonableness. I had offered him a trap door labeled Quiet Exit, and he'd taken it, the coward's way out, the only way he knew. The next 6 months were a lesson in building a life from the foundation up, and I was the architect, the foreman, and the grateful future tenant all in one. The sale of the Lincoln Park apartment was swift and brutal. The impersonal, staged photos made our former home look like a hotel suite, which is all it ever really was. The closing was handled remotely by Lisa. My 60% of the proceeds hit my account at a number that felt less like money and more like a transfusion of freedom. Work became a sanctuary, freed from the constant emotional drain of managing Jake's ego. My energy was redirected. The Q1 campaign I led wasn't just successful, it was the most profitable launch in our division's history. In April, my boss, Linda, called me into her corner office. Close the door, Sadie, she said, gesturing to a chair. She got straight to the point. The work you've been doing since the turn of the year has been exceptional, focused, innovative, ruthless in the best way. It's like a fog has lifted. Whatever you did over the holidays, bottle it. She slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. This is the offer. Director of Integrated Marketing. A 35% raise. A larger team. Direct report to me. You've earned it. I looked at the number. It was more than Jake made. A lot more. The irony was so rich, it was almost poetic. My little job was now a directorship that would make his head explode. Thank you, Linda. This means everything. I accept. Good. HR will send the formal letter. Now, go celebrate. And Sadie? She gave me a rare, knowing smile. Never dim your light for anyone again. Bad for business. I used the raise as a down payment. My new apartment wasn't in trendy Lincoln Park. It was in Andersonville, a neighborhood with tree-lined streets, independent bookstores, and a palpable sense of community. It was a sun-drenched top-floor condo in a classic three-flat, with original hardwood floors, a fireplace, and a small terrace overlooking a shared garden. It was warm, full of character, and mine, only mine. The first night I slept there, on a mattress on the floor, surrounded by boxes. I felt a sense of belonging I'd never experienced in the sterile perfection of the old place. The final divorce decree arrived by certified mail on a Tuesday in August. It was a single, anticlimactic piece of paper that made official what my heart had known since Christmas Eve. I was free. I framed it in a simple black frame and hung it in my home office next to my new diploma from a leadership course I'd taken. A monument to a closed chapter. The past, however, has a way of sending echoes. One Saturday afternoon in early fall, I was in my favorite neighborhood cafe, buried in a manuscript for a book on behavioral economics, when a voice cut through my focus. Sadie? Oh my God, Sadie Miller? I looked up. It was Ben, one of Jake's colleagues from the finance firm who'd been at the fateful party. He looked genuinely happy to see me, though his eyes held a trace of awkward sympathy. Ben, hi, how are you? I gestured to the empty chair across from me. I'm good. Wow, you look amazing. He did a terrible job of hiding his surprise. I felt amazing, healthy, rested, dressed in clothes I loved without a shred of concern for someone else's approval. Thanks. Andersonville agrees with me. Please, sit. He slid into the chair, setting down his coffee. I heard you moved. This is your neighborhood. It is. I love it here. An awkward pause. He stirred his coffee unnecessarily. So, how have you been? Really? I smiled. Easy and open. Really good. Ben. Better than good. I got a promotion. Bought a place. Life is unexpectedly fantastic. He grinned, the awkwardness melting into relief. That's awesome to hear. Seriously, after the party, and then Jake leaving the firm, we were all a little worried about you. That was new information. Jake left the firm? Ben's eyes widened slightly, as if he'd said too much. Oh, you didn't know? Yeah, about 3 months ago. It was weird. He said he had a better opportunity, but the rumor was he was asked to leave. Something about his management style not being a cultural fit anymore. A few juniors had complained. After that party, let's just say people started seeing his principles in a new light at work. 2. The constant critiques. The my way or the highway stuff. It didn't look like leadership anymore. It just looked like being a dick. I absorbed this. The tendrils of his behavior, once exposed, had spread and poisoned the well of his professional life too. It was a natural consequence, one I hadn't engineered, but was deeply satisfied to hear. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I almost meant it. The part of me that had once loved him felt a pang for the wreckage of a life, but it was a distant, historical pang, like reading about a natural disaster in a far-off country. Ben leaned in, lowering his voice. He's been active online, LinkedIn, mostly, painting himself as this visionary solopreneur now, and on Facebook, with the whole personal growth through adversity shtick. Some of the guys feel bad for him, but a lot of us, we were at the party. Sadie, we heard what he said. We saw his face when Chloe called him out. Stephanie, God bless her, has made sure no one forgets the ecosystem story. It's kind of legendary. He chuckled. So, when he posts these vague things about toxic relationships and moving on from narcissists, most of us just roll our eyes. We know who the narcissist in that equation was. So, he was trying to rewrite history, to cast himself as the victim. Of course he was. It was the only move he had left. But the key witnesses weren't buying his version. The truth, once spoken aloud in a room of peers, had a life of its own. Well, I said, taking a sip of my tea, he's entitled to his narrative. I'm just grateful I'm no longer a character in it. Ben nodded vigorously. Good. That's the way to be. Listen, it was great seeing you. You really do look happy. He stood, then hesitated. For what it's worth, I'm glad you got out. Everyone is. He was an asshole. Sadie. And you were way too good for him. Thank you, Ben. That means a lot. He left, and I returned to my book. But the words blurred. I wasn't upset. I was settled. The last loose thread of that old life had just been snipped. He was a pathetic figure now, telling lies on the internet to an audience that pitted him. His punishment wasn't anything I had to administer. It was the life he had built for himself. A house of cards collapsing under the weight of its own emptiness. That evening, Chloe came over to Kristen, my new terrace. I'd bought proper furniture, a bistro set, and a string of globe lights. We ordered sushi and opened a bottle of expensive champagne. The real kind, not the proverbial one we'd toasted with months before. I told her about running into Ben. She nearly choked on her sake, roll laughing. A solopreneur? Of what? A consulting firm on how to lose friends and alienate people? I love it. The universe has a beautiful sense of justice. It does. I agreed, watching the lights twinkle above us. How's the real world? Any new victims for me to save from themselves? Please, my dance card is full with just you, she said, topping off our glasses. But seriously, look at this. Look at you, in your gorgeous apartment, with your fancy title, drinking champagne on your own terrace. You did it, Saad. You really, truly did it. I looked around, at the pots of herbs I was trying not to kill, at the comfortable, mismatched furniture that felt like me, at the city skyline twinkling in the distance, at my best friend's proud face, a deep, unwavering contentment settled in my bones. We did it. I corrected her. I had the world's best support team, a legal shark, a ride or die, and a mom who makes a mean pancake. To the team, Chloe said, raising her glass. Our phones buzzed in unison on the table. A FaceTime call. My mom. I answered, putting her on speaker. My girls. Her face filled the screen, beaming. She was in her kitchen, a familiar backdrop. How's the terrace? Perfect. Mom, I said, panning the phone around. Wish you were here. Next weekend. I'm already packed. But I'm calling because I just got the most delicious piece of gossip from Nancy. Her daughter, Lisa, your lawyer? She ran into Marjorie at a charity luncheon. Chloe and I leaned in. Do tell. Chloe purred. Apparently, Marjorie was holding court. As usual, talking about her son's bold new venture. But get this, when someone asked about you, Sadie, she got flustered, said it was a private matter and that sometimes people grow apart. No more that one was never family-oriented crap. Just a quick subject change. Lisa said the woman looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. She's been defanged. The great Marjorie is embarrassed. We all laughed, the sound ringing out into the warm night air. The final pillar of that old world had crumbled into polite, flustered silence. After we hung up with my mom, Chloe grew quiet for a moment. You're not just out. You know, you're free. And you're powerful. You took the worst thing he could throw at you, the disrespect of your family, the belittling of your soul, and you turned it into fuel. You built this. She gestured to the apartment. To me. Never forget that power. It's yours now. I knew she was right. The woman who had tiptoed around Jake's moods, who had absorbed his criticisms, who had packed a suitcase with a trembling heart, was gone. In her place was someone who knew her own worth, who had fought for it and won. The victory wasn't just in leaving. It was in the person I had become in the process. Resilient, clear-eyed, and unapologetically myself. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. It was from a guy I'd been on a few casual, fun dates with a history professor with kind eyes and zero interest in controlling anyone's ecosystem. Hope your terrace christening is a success. I'm grading papers on my sad fire escape. Jealous. Coffee this week? I smiled, typing back a quick reply. I looked at Chloe, at the sparkling city, at my new, beautiful, imperfect life sprawling out before me. I won't forget, I said to Chloe, and to myself. I clinked my glass against hers. The clear, bright sound, a perfect period on the old sentence, and a joyful, open parenthesis on the new one. I promise, I won't forget a thing.